Hi, my name is Dr. Robert Shorey. As a Cerec doctor, I rely on this CS2 or CS oven daily for making crowns with eMax. And if it's out of commission, I'm out of commission. And just recently, I had 2 errors about not reaching enough vacuum, and that can't continue. So fortunately, through Cerec doctors, I had purchased another oven and vacuum, so I had a backup spare, and here it is. But I'm going to be showing you today how to rebuild one of these vacuums in case yours goes out. You can buy the rebuild kit. Here it is over here through Grainger. It's about $150, and this has several items: new gaskets, new heads, cylinders, and things that are needed to have proper vacuum pressure. So we're going to go through how to do that. Here's the unit here. It's by Thomas. You can buy a whole new one for anywhere from $500 to $1,000. You can rebuild it for $150. So the first thing you should do is we're going to be taking this head off of this to replace and place these parts into it. Is mark this head using a Sharpie pin so you can reorient this in the proper position without guessing, was it this way or that way. Now there's screws on top of here, 8 of them, and they take like a 20 or 22 star drive, but you can also use a flathead screwdriver. So I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver to undo these, and that will help us get all those screws off, and then we can get into the internals of this and start replacing the parts. All right, the tools and things that you'll need: torque wrench. I have a crescent wrench, a 25T and a 20, flathead screwdriver. All these things are needed for these assorted screws. One of the problems is I'm going to have to Google the torque settings, because my torque wrench here is in Newton meters, and they put inch pounds or whatever it is. So I'm going to have to do a translation for that on the instructions. So the first step in the process is going to be to remove these head screws, and that will allow you to get into the system. But before you do that, take a Sharpie pin and mark the orientation so that we can put this back exactly the direction we took it apart. So we put a couple arrows to match up there. Go over to this side, put an arrow here and another arrow here. And now we know that if all these arrows line up, that we have this head on exactly the way we removed it. And when we're inside, I would advise doing the same thing so that you don't reverse any of these. So at this stage, we've removed all of the head screws from the top head. Notice that here's the inlet to pull air in. This side's just a plug. And here's what it looks like. It's a little bit dirty inside. We're going to use a microfiber towel to clean out that, I don't know if that's carbon or graphite debris. Same thing here. You see the carbon and graphite and here. So we're going to start disassembling this part. Okay, so we set this over here. Now we have to bring this off, and this gets you into where the cylinder head is. You can see these little flapper units. We're going to be changing those. Now this again is something where you want to mark the orientation before we change everything. We want to put it back exactly the way we took it apart. And so I'm going to draw an arrow. I'll pick a strategic area for that. Here and here, and we'll point to here. For this corner, we'll mark this number 1. We'll mark this one number 2. We'll draw some lines over in this corner and an arrow. And so I know when I go to put this back together that the number 2 head, in fact I'll write 2 here, and this one is number 1. So 1 with 1, 2 with 2. And that way we won't get this orientation off. That's critical on this rebuild, there's some cups in here too, and we have to look at exactly how they were. Now notice here that there is one flange, a second flange, and another one. Flip this over and you see that there's one flapper and a holder. In the instructions they have you using another one like this side, but that's not how this system comes apart, so I want to follow the way it was originally, and lining these up also is a little bit of a challenge. So there we are, we've got these. We're going to set these aside now that they've been marked, and here we have our cylinder heads. We can lift this off, and this is a used cylinder head. This one is not in too bad a shape, but you can see where the wear marks are. Now the critical thing here is to look here and see the orientation of these little guys. And in this case, the orientation is this flange is pointing upwards. In another compressor of the same maker, it points downwards, probably for a compressor versus a vacuum. So make sure when you put this back together that these cups are in the proper orientation. We're going to be undoing these screws in the top of the cylinder head here and here, and they're on there pretty tight. Now I looked up the specifications. When we put these back in, they'll be torqued down at 2 Newton meters, which is not very strong, so I might just do that by hand. But these other guys here, the cylinder heads, those will be 6 Newton meters. So the instructions give you foot-pounds, but I went online and translated that. All right, I'm going to turn the video off and work on these parts. But again, take these cylinder heads out. We're going to be replacing these cylinder sleeves. And then we're going to replace these also, remembering that the orientation for this is upwards. All right. Okay, I took the screws out of the top cylinder heads, and these guys are on there quite tight. So even though the specs say that it should be 2 Newton meters, this one might have been that. This was quite a bit tighter. And the other thing I did again is I took a felt pin and I marked the orientation. In fact, I've got to put another mark right here. Because you want to get these on right. If you lift them up, there's also a little set area right there, and you have to line that right back up. Now, the good thing about these screws that you're actually going to be replacing is you can see that they have some Loctite on them already pre-done, and so when you screw that in, that will help keep that from coming back off. But we're going to take these off, and we're going to replace these cups and put new cups in. And then the struggle with these is getting this in without messing up the periphery of these cups. But remember, look inside of this cup, and you can see from that piston going up and down where the wear has occurred. And these new cups, nice and shiny, and the shiny part is the top side. As you see here, they do not go in this direction. They go with the shiny side up, okay? Now, as you replace these cups, remember, with this facing upwards, you want to start pushing this into this. Be very careful, just kind of work it down in. And then we're going to, with those lines, work it here so that we know that that little part drops right into there, and just double check it. And then we're going to screw that down and tighten it. And then we'll repeat the same thing on the other side. But to wobble that in and wobble it down, be careful. You don't want to muck up the edges of this and cause a leak around there. So this whole thing creating a suction up and down is what's going to pull the air. And this is just a repeat of what I was talking about. I carefully work this into the cylinder, and then we're going to start transferring it to here, lining up those lines, and then double checking that that cylinder stop falls into that little hole there, and lining this up. And then we'll tighten this down, and then we'll start reassembling this system. Now the next step is going to be to replace these little flappers. And so if you have a 1/4 inch socket, that's going to fit here nicely. When you're putting it back together, keeping this from rotating as you tighten, it's the difficult part. Most of us dentists have one of these tools, and you lay it flat here, and then you can tighten against it and it'll hold the alignment. Of course, I'm going to pull this off also to get this out of my way. This will go back on at the very end. I'm going to use a microfiber towel to clean this head off. And then again, this was marked number 1, so I know it goes on the number 1 side, and I know the orientation of it. And I have to get these guys lined up so that as we seat this down, this rubber gasket goes in here and seats nicely against that. So all these are just little precision things, but as dentists, we're always doing precision work. And so it's just a step-by-step organizational process. One other thought here is this is quite grimy, and this might be a good time to put gloves on to keep all this stuff from getting under your fingers. But I took a microfiber towel and really wiped this down well, put a little cleaning solution on to try to get rid of some of this stuff. I want to make sure that it's clean where that little flapper goes. Obviously this will build up again as this unit is operating, but I wanted to clean it up a little bit and get rid of some of the grime that's been accumulating inside of it. All right, now at this stage I've been working on one of the cylinder heads, and I placed the little floppy on there and clean this area up. As I went to the other side, this one here had a little bit more stuff, like a little corrosion right here. So I took some polishing compound, polished just a little bit and cleaned a little bit. I'm not going to try to make this all shiny, but I want to get any debris off of here so that when that floppy's sitting over here, it's sealed well. And then I used a Q-tip to make sure I didn't leave any abrasive cleaning solution behind, get that out of there. I wouldn't imagine it'd be good to have a scouring material working inside a cylinder head without any oil. So these are oilless systems, and there's a lot of friction. I believe that there's graphite in these little cups, and so that's how it can operate at these high speeds without causing too much friction. Now, another thing I've found is useful is if you place some kind of straight edge here while you torque down this screw. Otherwise, that little floppy wants to rotate as you get tighter. So just place a piece of metal against it flat and then torque it down. These fittings here, again, they say 2 Newton meters, which is something that I didn't really bother to torque because I will do the head screws at 6, but 2 is a pretty light force. I figure if it feels tight to me, it's got to be at least 2. So I finished the second head. So here's the first head in its place. Make sure that it seats down on that cylinder there and that they're locked into each other. Now this one I haven't put the gasket in yet, but I put the flapper on it. Here's the other flapper. Now remember, on this side with the square gasket, it seems it has 3 plates. On the other side, it has just the 2. Now the instructions show both of these having 3, but I want to do it the way the factory had it originally, and this is the second one of these I've rebuilt for dental vacuums, and it seems that they don't have the 3 on this side with the round circle here. So I'm going to start putting these gaskets into their place, and then I have to line it up over the top of this cylinder, and after I get that set up, then I can put the head back on and torque the 8 bolts down, and at that stage we'll plug it in and see if it starts up without anything knocking. All right, so these heads are back in place, and when you do get it lined up and seated down, you'll usually hear a little click. If you don't, then check, make sure that the cylinder's towards the center and that it clicks in, and then once you hear it click, it'll fasten down. There's little stops here. So remember, this was the number 2 cylinder. This was the number 1 we put over in these corners. Be careful when you're cleaning it, you don't clean off your numbering system. And at this point now, we're going to lay the head over it and gradually torque it in just like a car tire. You start, add 1 corner, 1 quarter, 1 corner, 1 corner, another corner, and gradually get them down to their specifications, torqued down. So, and remember, we also had those arrows here to show us the proper alignment of this head if it's been moved around on the tabletop. All the old parts are sitting over here, all right? These gaskets, be careful that it doesn't lift back out and then you squish it and you have a leak there. So this guy here is a little bit squirrely compared to the round one on the opposite side. Okay, so completed the rebuild, and the unit ran through cycle number 1 and everything seemed to work properly. Nice and quiet, much quieter now. You can get a rebuild kit also. I haven't tried out that one from on eBay. from a pond company for pond aerators. I guess evidently these units are also used for as a compressor to blow air out in a pond. Same exact manufacturer, same exact cylinders and so forth. And that ranges anywhere from $31 for just a few of the parts, no screws, to replacing the cylinders and most of the parts, but again, no screws. So if you wanted to just use the old screws, instead of paying around $130 to $150 for the rebuild kit, you can get it for as low as anywhere from $35 to $59, so not bad. And so I'll probably try those parts. I ordered some. Anyway, glad everything's up and running. Went through a cycle without an air that's much quieter, and so it's definitely worth the effort.